Good morning. Welcome to morning meditation. Great to have you with us. I'm going to go down a bit of a path this morning that hopefully will bear a little fruit, but may not bear very much. But we get this reading on Sunday, Deuteronomy 26. And this is the reading that we get. Moses spoke to the people, "The priest shall receive the basket from you, and shall set it in front of the altar of the Lord your God. Then you shall declare before the Lord your God." My father was a wandering Aramean. This reading, I'm going to take the little wider context because it starts in verse 4, and I think the first 3 verses actually help us. And so when you have come into the land which the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage, and have taken possession and settled in it, you shall take some first fruits of the various products of the soil which you harvest from the land the Lord your God is giving you. Put them in a basket. Go to the place which the Lord your God will choose as the dwelling place for his name. And we will see in the Old Testament that there will be a few of these that are set up around the land of Israel. There you shall go to the priest in the office at that time and say, "Today I acknowledge to the Lord my God that I have indeed come into the land which the Lord swore to our ancestors to give us." The priest then shall take the basket from your hands and set it in front of the altar of the Lord your God. Then you shall declare in the presence of the Lord your God, "My father was a refugee Aramean who went down to Egypt with a small household and lived there as a resident alien." My father was a refugee Aramean, or the words often are the wandering Aramean. And this line, "My father was a wandering Aramean who went down to Egypt with a small household and lived there as an alien, but there he became a nation, great, strong, and numerous." All right. "My father was a wandering Aramean who went down to Egypt with a small household, but there he became a nation and numerous. When the Egyptians maltreated us and oppressed us, imposing hard labor upon us, we cried to the Lord, the God of our fathers. The Lord our God heard our cry, saw our affliction, our toil, our oppression. He brought us out of Egypt with his strong hand and outstretched arm, with terrifying power, with signs and wonders. And bringing us into this country, he gave us this land flowing with milk and honey. Therefore I have now brought you the first fruits of the products of the soil, which you, O Lord, have given me. And having set them before the Lord your God, you shall bow down in the Lord's presence." Okay, it's kind of a strange reading in some ways to be pulled for our first reading for the first Sunday of Lent. But what does it remind us of? And of course, this is matched with the gospel, and it's the temptation of Jesus in the desert. Now it's interesting, right? Because they could have easily give us a straight reading about temptation in the desert, about how the people turned from God and complained against God in the desert, if they're just following the path of wanting to talk about the 40 days or the 40 years in the desert. And they could have did 40 days on the mountain. There are lots of choices. It's interesting that they give us this line that talks about after we've made the promised land, after our 40 years of sojourning, after our deep period of slavery. It harkens us back to the freedom that will be ours. It's almost like it pushes us forward to contemplate the end of our 40 days. We already are starting to we sort of keep our head down during Lent and we don't think too much about Easter, but this reading causes us to raise an eye to the future. What will we do when we come through our 40 days? And that we come through and offer our first fruits to God. And of course, it's the 40 days, and it's coming into the new land, and the first fruits of that land need to be offered to God out of pure gratefulness, out of pure joy about what God has given us. Okay. This wandering Aramean, it is one of the opening lines of the Passover. And once again, Passover coincides with our Christian celebration of Easter. It'll be the same day. If the moon falls at the wrong time, they can be in different months, but the moon is right, and we're all right, so we'll celebrate Passover. The Torah says we are, and so one of the things about the Passover, it's like, why do we do what we do? And so the Torah, the Old Testament, Deuteronomy says we are to speak these words before God and say, my father was a wandering Aramean. And so this is part of, a lot of the Passover wording is, why do we do what we do? And so the questioning of the 4 children, why do we do this? How is this night different from any other night? And so why do we do what we do? The Torah says this is why we do what we do. My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt and sojourned there. So this reminds us of Jacob, right? Jacob ends up in Egypt and sojourns there and wanders there. But the whole time they are there, they recognize they are away from their homeland. They are away from the place of God. They are away from the place that God is giving them. With a few in number, he became there a great and populous nation. It's one of these strange things that Israel gets sent away, the people get sent away, but then in this new place, they become numerous and strong. God has a plan. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and afflicted us. And this is one of the interesting things about the Passover, and then in the same way, our celebration of the Easter Vigil. It is like we keep one eye open, half open to that future moment, that Easter Vigil. It's interesting the way they phrased this. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us. And of course, these are people who are doing it, the Passover, they're doing the Passover 3,000 years or 3,300 years after the day of the Passover, 3,300 years after they had left Egypt. But they're still saying, the Egyptian dealt harshly with us and afflicted us and imposed hard labor upon us. And we cried out to the Lord, the God of our fathers, and God heard our cry and saw our affliction and our oppression. He brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm and with great signs and wonders. And we will recount the Passover story. And as we read, we will go around the table with each person, taking a turn to read a paragraph out loud. And so this wandering Aramean. And so this reading that we get, for this first Sunday of Lent connects us with the story of the Hebrews in the desert, the story of the Israelites in the desert, and their longing for that day when they will come to the promised land, where they will give their first fruits to God. So we try to enter into that story. For us, when we go back to the past and we see this is our story, in the same way, at the story of the resurrection with Mary running to the tomb, or the story of Peter and John running to the tomb, it becomes our story. We have seen the Lord because we're part of this tradition. We're part of this family. We're part of this life. I'm going to give you these first paragraphs that are read in the Passover. And not all Passover, there's a couple different things that go on with the Passover. One is the Haggadah. This is the words. The other is the Seder. It is the meal. And so the words and the meal go together, but there's kind of a rite for each one of these pieces. And so the wording, the Haggadah, that's probably very poor Hebrew, probably a better pronunciation. Our patriarch Abraham and his wife Sarah went to the land of Canaan, where he became the founder of a great nation. God tells us, know this for certain, that your descendants will be strangers in a strange land and be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. But know that in the end I shall bring judgment on the oppressors. Abraham's grandson Jacob and his family went down to Egypt during a time of famine throughout the land. In Egypt, Jacob and the Israelites lived and prospered until a new Pharaoh arose who said, behold, the children of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Let us then deal shrewdly with them, lest they become more powerful, and in the event of war join our enemies in fighting against us and gain control of our region. The Egyptians set taskmasters over the Israelites with forced labor and made them build cities for Pharaoh. The Egyptians embittered the lives of the Israelites with harsh labor. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased. And the Egyptians came to despise them. Pharaoh ordered every Hebrew boy that is born shall be thrown in the Nile River and drowned. This is the point where we hit today's daily reading, where they're trying to hide Moses from being drowned. And so in our daily reading today, we see him getting drawn out of the water by the Egyptian woman, by the Egyptian princess, and taken to be cared for by his own mother. And then he goes back to the Egyptian princess. Great stuff. But this is the story that builds up. We will proclaim at our Easter Vigil, this is the night of our Passover. This is the night where we were set free. This is the night where we crossed the Red Sea. So we too see our heritage in this history. And in this great first reading we will get this week, which means far more to the Jewish people who celebrate Passover than to us. We don't use this line the way they do. My father was a wandering Aramean. And so this line, and this line is actually used in two ways that, and I don't know, this may be a little difficult to explain. There's two ways to do the ending of the name of Aramean. It's either, my father was Jacob in the desert, searching for the Lord, searching for the promised land, searching, spiritual seeker for the fullness of God's life. This is our journey of Lent. And the other way, we were oppressed by the Aramites. Two ways to translate that, and it works both ways. We were oppressed. We're an oppressed people, only surviving by the outstretched hand and mercy of God. This is us in the desert, seeking, but also only surviving by the gift, the instrument, the daily bread of the hand of God. We enter both of these as we begin this Lenten journey. I don't know how I'm going to do this for a homily this weekend, but it's kind of beautiful and takes us back to the roots, which will become so precious at our Easter Vigil. And of course, if we don't have those, then the Easter Vigil comes. Why do we go that long Mass? Why do we stay up at night? Why do we vigil? If we don't know the story, it becomes not so meaningful. And so we'll try to answer these questions as we go through on morning meditation. And we'll hopefully take a little bit more out of the Passover Haggadah, the words of the Passover, which brings such a backdrop to what we do. And of course, Jesus at the night of the Last Supper celebrates a Passover meal. Why do we do what we do? Because our father was a wandering Aramean and sojourned in the lands of Egypt. And then as they're going out from Egypt, before they hit the promised land, when you go out, offer your first fruits to the Lord. Remember the story. Eat the meal. This is our story. This is our Passover. This is our Eucharist. Thank you for joining us. Peace be with you. Blessings on your Lent. Of course, it is Friday, a day of abstinence, and we don't try to go to the most wonderful fish fry in the world, but to eat simply in peace and God's blessing. God bless.